One thing we haven't talked about, though, is the role of developers in all of this. We've talked about teams, we've talked about external money coming in. Developers have provided support on varying scales, obviously. At one extreme, the LCS example, a very tightly regulated sports league that has rules that you have to follow or you're fined. Punishments can be levied against your team or organization. Then you have the Wild West in some games. What role of support or what amount of support do you think developers should provide for their titles? Is there like a best example out there, or do you think that everyone still has a little bit to learn?
I think that developers should create a popular game, and if that game becomes a spectator sport and it starts to grow, then I think it is on their responsibility to provide some sort of governance and let that game grow in that spectator space. And I think some developers they're not sports company. They're not, they don't run venues and they don't have referees and rules and tournament stuff. Like, that's not their business, right? But they kind of get brought into it. So some of them will do a great job by aligning with tournament organizers that will do a really good job of doing that on their behalf, or some will decide to do that in-house. And, both are fine. All I care about is that as something is really popular and it's growing, there's a lot of viewership, and there's players are making a lot of money, and there's a lot of advertising dollars on the table, that there's some governance, they're taking care of their game. They're slapping wrists when they need to. They're saying, hey, no cheating in my game. Like, you guys are banned. There's been some cases even of developers that have been kind of hands off, getting involved when they need to. And so as long as they're doing that, then
I just want to say, having being from Twitch, right? We deal with a lot of developers all the time, and I know this is more for you guys, but I just wanted to make this point clear, right? You mentioned a baseline. Right, like what is like the thing that a developer has to do to make an esport, right, so to speak. And one of the pet peeves that I have is when a developer creates a game and does not create the appropriate tools for which the game can be broadcasted, right? And can be supported in multiple ways. And that's the thing, right? You need this ground level grassroots initiative. And you cannot get to Madison Square Garden without starting there. And a lot of people want to go from point A to point B, and they don't want to think about everything that's in between. So I would argue, and I hope, I wonder if you guys agree with me on this, I would argue that at the base of it, they have to be cognizant of the ground level, of the grassroots. And then at that point, you build upon the structure, and then eventually you get to Madison Square Garden and the supermodels and all that stuff, right? That's the dream, right? I'm bringing supermodels a lot into this conversation. You can clearly tell where my head is at.
Yes.
What are your guys' thoughts in regards to that, Jason? You did Call of Duty.
I totally agree with you, and I think it's a beautiful thing that developers finally woke up and realized the potential for having competition in their game. Like Kevin and I were talking before the show started, back in 2003, 4, 5. Like, we were begging Valve, like, please come in. Like, we've got something great going on here. We could really use your support to bolster it. And they just weren't interested. Now, obviously, it's completely different. But it's such a symbiotic, mutually beneficial relationship. Like, you put a little time and energy and money into this, and people are going to play your game longer. They're going to buy more things inside your game. You're going to make more money. And guess what? You get to release part 2 or part 3 or part 6 or whatever it is. And you've got this giant, inherent, built-in fan base ready to go, voraciously devour your game. I mean, any developer that builds a game that could even conceivably be an esport that doesn't put the basic tools in, like, it blows my mind. Perfect example off the top of my head is Titanfall. I played the heck out of Titanfall. I loved Titanfall. You're jumping in giant machines and squashing people. I mean, it was fantastic. When asked if they were going to be an esport, they said, no, we're not doing anything in that direction. Where's Titanfall now, really? Yeah. What could Titanfall have been if they had really kind of invested in esports and kind of tried to develop a community? Because there was a small grassroots contingent that was ready to play that game a little more competitively, but they weren't given that option. And then you've got games like Smite that built that grassroots and really focused and really cared about esports and the competitive side of their game, and their game's just continuing to go up.
Yeah, even Halo, right? The recent Halo, they put a little bit of effort into it, and now you have a $1.5 million prize pool. In 1 week, they raised $500,000.
Yeah.
Like, that's just absurd, right? And that's the beauty of crowdfunding, but that's just the effort that goes into it. And I think that a lot of people just they look at it and they're like, dev resources, and like, I get it, right? Because I've dealt with so many developers who think like that. But at the end of the day, if this is a goal, if this is something you want, this is the baseline thing you have to do.
I think some of them are being taught that this is what they want as well. I mean, the most obstinate and obstructive company that I can think of lately has been Nintendo to the Smash crowd. I mean, Smash has been wanting support from Nintendo. They've been beating down the doors
Begging.
of Nintendo to try and get support. And finally, in like the last few weeks, they're like, right, we'll start sending reps out to events and things like that. We'll figure out what this esports thing is. But even companies that are outside of this are basically being forcibly told, no, you better pay attention, because the thing I think is most interesting about esports is that there's been a couple of studies that have been done that show that esports fans are not necessarily your high LTV user, your high like long-term value users where you're going to get tons of money out of them, but they do become that whenever you do have esports, when you have this infrastructure, because those are the people that evangelize your game for you, because those are the people that go out and tell every one of their friends, I play this game 40 hours a week, I love it, you go play it too. They're starting to realize that there's very real value in that community.
Yeah, and speaking of Twitch, I spent a lot of time studying Twitch because I find it very intriguing. And you can watch a game that'll come out and be like the flavor of the week or even the flavor of the month, and it's shot up to #1 or #2 game on Twitch, and then it goes.
Yep.
And it's gone. With the competitive esports titles, you can go month after month, some year after year after year, and they're still getting free advertising for their game because people love it, and it's a competition, and it takes on a life and a loyalty of its own. And it's beyond me why any serious developer would not consider an esport.